That was one of the things that I decided at the outset. Well, the first one, I think, because Duncan did come first, like Adam, and Gemma after. But I wanted him to be a fairly ordinary man and not suffering from great angst.
A not dysfunctional voice.
Yes, a not dysfunctional voice. But I also was very concerned that he should have some sort of emotional connection with the case and with the characters that were involved in the case. Otherwise, I feel the books become merely a puzzle. And I hope I've succeeded to some extent in that.
Oh, I think you succeed very well. And they're also not police procedurals, as one would think. You know, I mean, the object is not the policing, but rather the characters, and that it's not an Ed McBain 87th police procedural.
No,
sort of thing.
I tend to describe them as police procedurals, but they're definitely police procedurals in the British sense of police procedural, not the American.
Can you define that a little bit better? Expand upon it? What is the difference? And I'll throw out a quote to you that I've always kind of liked from Elizabeth George, who came back, I think it was in 1991, to visit us. And she said that she is attracted to the corporateness of British policing, that it tends to be, you know, a supportive and kind of a group activity. It isn't, as oftentimes in American books, the rogue cop against everybody else in the cop shop. Or you know, the alienated, or in other words, the American private investigator spliced in to the police force. That a British police novel generally has multiple investigators, more of a sense of community and camaraderie, I think. Sharing of information and tasks, and a pooling of resources, rather than the one guy going to show up everybody else, or the, you know, the spectacular lone raid on the
It's the American cowboy ethic, isn't it?
It is. It is. Is that your sense of it too?
Oh, I think so. And just the British tradition of policing is very different. Again, you know, we have this sort of frontier cowboy ethic in the States, I think, and the British policeman has it's much been. The, of course, now popular term is community policing, but that has always been the case in Britain.
And they don't go armed very often.
No, not very often.
Probably more so today, but for a long time, they had to get special permission if they were going to carry firearms in certain instances. And Bobbies on the Beat went with clubs and nightsticks, you know, rather than revolvers. There was less violence, I think, and a much more courteous and helpful. I mean, they were perceived of as part of the community rather than ranged against it. I don't know if that's changing a lot as the nature of Britain is changing a lot.
Well, I think it is to some extent, especially in, you know, lower income, higher crime areas. But I think that the British are making a definite effort to either, you know, go back to or keep the tradition of community policing, because it does work for the most part better than the Lone Ranger.
I think New York City's made quite a spirited...
Yeah, I've read something recently that they've made great strides.
Putting cops out of cars and back onto walking beats, mounted policemen.
Yeah. We have bike cops where we live,
do you?
Which is great, yeah.
We do too. In addition, I was just thinking that in downtown Scottsdale, we actually have mounted policemen. You know, they're able to go up and down some of those narrow streets on horses and whatever, and be extremely visible. I've always felt rather safe, actually, being a small merchant in that area, although, if I recall right, last year there was somebody actually shot right in front of the restaurant across the street. You know, it was not an OK Corral kind of thing, but
more like a domestic.
I don't remember. I wasn't in the store, and I don't remember the circumstances. I just remember being so surprised that there was any violence on this little street, and it gave me, you know, an echo of the fact that Phoenix and Scottsdale are changing pretty dramatically into, well, we're now the 6th biggest city, so, you know, there's a lot of urban violence and so forth that comes with that I was less prepared for. But anyway, going back to your books, your first one is set in Yorkshire, and then in 1994, which may have been when you first came to visit us, All Shall Be Well, is in London, and a wonderful concept.
Mostly in Hampstead, a little bit in Surrey. Well, one of the reasons that I chose a Scotland Yard detective rather than a regional CID was because I wanted to be able to move my characters around. I'd had the opportunity to do quite a bit of traveling in Britain, and I wanted to take advantage of that, and it is such fun to use a different location or a variety of locations for each book, because I do find myself going back to places that I particularly like. There's a part of Surrey that actually shows up in All Shall Be Well in the second book that I've gone back to a good many times now in different guises.
Well, when I said London, I suppose I was thinking, you know, suburban as well as, but the case comes to Kincaid, if I remember, because he lives, isn't he a neighbor of,
Yes, yes, it's his neighbor that dies, and actually I was thinking, to go on with what we were talking about a minute ago, he does in many ways function more like an amateur sleuth. I was trying to think out of all the cases. Well, I suppose it's probably about half and half, things that he sort of gets into and chooses to investigate for whatever reason because he becomes emotionally involved in the case, and then, you know, the ones that are actually assigned to him. So I get to sort of have the best of both worlds there, I think.
You do, and in fact, the Dorothy Sayers paradigm for Lord Peter Wimsey really wouldn't work today. I mean, it's hard to imagine any modern police force that would let an aristocratic lord.
I do have difficulties with the amateur sleuth these days. I think it can be done well, but I certainly think it's more difficult than it used to be.
It is. Professor B.J. Ron at Hunter College in New York
I know
and
B.J.
Yes, you do, have had some very serious discussions about this. I asked her for help when I was drafting up a lecture for my first crime fiction class at Arizona State some years ago about the traditional mystery, and what to do is about this very question of the traditional mystery today being primarily policemen rather than the gifted or the aristocratic sleuth. And we both agreed that what has actually happened is it's still the same gifted aristocratic, or at least
civilized and privileged in some way, not necessarily class and money.
Exactly. Somebody like Kincaid. And that it really is that same character, but now a member of the police force, because otherwise it would be, frankly, incredible for them to be doing any investigating. And so I really think of Kincaid as you know, a 90s Lord Peter, and I think probably most of your readers do, whether consciously or unconsciously.
Well, I'm actually very interested in the physical investigation of crime and the forensics involved, and have taken a forensic biology course, and I try very hard to get my facts right. And I have very luckily have a friend who's a Dallas County medical examiner that she's a great mystery reader, and she loves to be asked questions. So I usually have a chapter or two that I run by Karen and say, is this okay? Would the body look like this? Is this, you know, is the autopsy scene accurate, and all this kind of stuff. But I find myself going to great lengths to invent a crime that cannot be solved by forensic means, because then you do not have a traditional novel of detection.
No, then you really do have a police procedural.
Yeah, then you really do have a police procedural. So there is a distinction there.
Well, you're very meticulous. I mean, I always think of your novels as very elegantly written and very carefully crafted, but I always think of you as meticulous.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Caught you by surprise there, didn't I? Don't blush, it's okay. I really have always enjoyed those qualities, and as I think I've said to you before, I think you work oftentimes on a fairly tight canvas, and I really liked All Shall Be Well. Although when I made that remark recently in Albuquerque, where you were the Toastmaster of the convention, which was appropriately enough focused on the literary mystery, and I was interviewing you, I think I said that All Shall Be Well takes place almost entirely within this small apartment in London, and you reminded me that there were scenes where, in fact, the action moved out. But see, my dominant impression...
the feel of it is that it takes place on a very close canvas, and I do that deliberately. I think that's one of the things that I feel is essential to this traditional mystery, is this sort of small canvas and the closed circle of suspects.